Good evening. I see almost everybody's taken their seats. Those of you who haven't, move towards a seat, please. I'm Bob Tippett of Tippett Company. Our company is here in Pasco, Washington. We're a third-generation company, and we're very, very proud to be involved with Washington Policy Center. I am privileged to be on the board of Washington Policy Center, who is sponsoring this event this evening. I'd like to welcome you to this Farm to Free Market dinner sponsored by Washington Policy Center. We're very grateful that you're all here, and we're very, very grateful too that the arm has reached, Washington Policy Center arm has reached into much of the ag community, and we're so grateful that you're here this evening from all over, and also very grateful for all the input that you've given to Washington Policy Center this year as we started our ag component, and it's been an amazing year. In fact, we're celebrating a year right about now. Tonight we're privileged to have our Congressman here, Newhouse, and you'll be hearing from him in just a little bit. Next, I would like to introduce the director of our ag program here, Madi Clark. She has come aboard, and she has been one busy lady. How many of you know her? Look at that. Yep. Well, we love the work that she's doing. She is diligent. She has been very integrous in what she has done, and she's been tireless, all the while raising a new baby. So I'd like to introduce Madi to you now.
Oh, wow. That's all I can say. This is an amazing turnout. Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you to all of you for coming tonight. This has been an amazing ride over the last 8 months, and it's so exciting to finally see it all come together and to see everyone that's interested in the work that we've done, that we're doing, that we're going to continue to do to keep the agriculture industry in Washington strong. As I thought about all of the work we've done this last year and what we're going to talk about tonight with Representative Newhouse, a phrase from E.M. Tiffany's FFA Creed came to mind. I believe in the future of agriculture, with a faith born not of words but of deeds, achievements won by past and present generations of agriculturalists with the promise of better days through better ways, even as the better things we now enjoy have come to us through the struggles of former years. Those words, I was 15 years old when I first heard those, and I had been on farm calls with my dad in the Midwest, all over the Corn Belt, New York, Oregon, Utah, kind of everywhere. He had itchy feet, liked to move. But I knew I loved farming, and I knew I loved agriculture. And I remember a year ago this month when I had the opportunity to meet our Eastern Washington director with my boss from Ag Association Management, Shane Johnson. And at that point, we managed 13 commodity organizations, and that represented 7 commodities. And in those 7 commodities, we had a lot of struggles. Our mint growers use a still 2 weeks out of the year. Some organizations try to treat it like that air contamination, they said, was running every single day for 365 days a year when they used it 2 weeks. Our oilseed growers were concerned over disease contamination. Our turfgrass seed growers were concerned about biotech contamination. Alfalfa seed growers worried about their bees and the regulation that would come to affect them. And hay growers, rightfully so, continue to worry about the ports. So we had all of these interests just in the 7 groups I ran. And when we met Chris and he told us that WPC was launching on this huge agriculture initiative, I was so excited, not thinking I would get the job, but that Washington Agriculture would have this opportunity to have a free market voice. And that is what I've hoped to bring over the last 8 months. We've had a lot of work done, and our goal is to reduce the regulatory burden and make it easier for farmers to farm. As we listen in tonight's event and participate, this is our chance to start making our own difference and start making Washington agriculture a little bit better day by day, trying to free up the market and make it a little easier for our farmers to farm and all of our Washington families to be a little better off. And it makes me end with the creed of, I believe that American agriculture can and will hold true to the best traditions of our national life, and I can exert an influence in my home and community which will stand solid for my part in that inspiring task. So tonight, this is our opportunity to exert our influence in making Washington agriculture a little bit better. And because of that, it's all of you and all of our supporters that have allowed us to get to where we're at. I want to thank them right now as we kick this off. Bob and Marilee Tippett, they got this started. They donated the seed money, they recognized the need for Washington agriculture, and they helped us kick it off. So thank you so much. And then I want to thank John Stuemiller and the Washington Farm Bureau. Without him and his support, I would not be standing here and we would not be here tonight. They were the ones that told the ag community we needed this, and they brought many people to the table. So thank you so much. Yes. And you will hear from him later this evening. And I also want to recognize that they're one of our main sponsors for this dinner. Some of our other ag sponsors that we want to recognize and thank this evening are Trico Companies is our VIP champion sponsor, so we'll give him a round of applause. And our patron sponsors are McDougall and Sons and Wafla. So, and then I want to name off our table sponsors, but if you guys know the FFA Power Clap, every name gets one clap. So, CHS Columbia, or Connell Grain Growers, Columbia Bank, Darren Crow with Waddle and Reed, the Northwest Dairy Federation and Dairy Gold, Highline Grain, Hop Growers of Washington, News Talk 870 KFLD, Lamson International, the McGregor Company, Mercer Canyons, Mike Polson, Mandy Minnick and the Northwest Farm Credit Services, Ari Powell Distributing, Steve Schwann, Tri-Cities Home Builders Association, Pacific Northwest Direct Seed Association, Washington Ag Network, Washington Friends of Farms and Forests, Washington Trust Bank, Washington State Tree Fruit Association, Washington Potato Commission, and Washington Association of Wheat Growers. So I hope you all will take a moment tonight to thank all of our sponsors and partners who have helped make tonight and the Ag Initiative and the work we've done over the last 8 months possible. So we'll give one big round of applause to everybody. So moving forward, I would like to introduce someone who has done a lot to get this initiative off the ground. He actually published our very first study, and many of you know him. He is another reason we're here tonight. So our Eastern Washington Director, Chris Cargill.
Maddie, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. It was nearly 1 year ago to the day that we announced we'd be expanding our research team at Washington Policy Center to the area of agriculture. It's very exciting. First of all, how many of you are familiar with WPC? That's great. So there are many of you who are familiar with WPC, but many of you may not be familiar with WPC. Let me briefly explain a little bit about the organization for those of you who are not all that familiar with Washington Policy Center. First of all, WPC is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization, a think tank. So if you've heard of think tanks on the national level, like the Heritage Foundation or the Brookings Institute or the American Enterprise Institute, those are national think tanks. We are a think tank on the statewide level. So we've been in existence now for more than 20 years. And we are a research and a public policy research organization and one of the most successful research organizations in the country. But we are on a statewide level. So we are made up of 7 research research centers that you see listed on the back of your folders there. Everyone in the room should have a folder that was sitting on your seat when you came into the room, and you see them listed on the back of your folders there. A Center for Agriculture, Education, Environment, Government Reform, Healthcare, Small Business, Transportation. We also do some technology and telecommunications work as it comes up. You see them also listed on the banners in the front of the room there. Of course, Agriculture, front and center here tonight, up on the stage. We do not sell a product. We're not in the business of anything other than ideas, research, and recommendations. But before 2016, of course, we were missing that key area at the very top of what is on the back of your folder there, agriculture. And that is why we met with some of the key players that are in this room. John Stewmiller of the Washington State Farm Bureau, Michelle Hennings of the Wheat Growers, John Devaney of the Tree Fruit Association, Matt Harris of the Potato Commission, Mike Polson, and many, many others. And we asked them all, do you think it's a good idea? Is this something that is needed for Washington Policy Center to get involved in agriculture, to put out research, put out recommendations? And all of them said, yes, this is something that WPC really does need to take the lead in. And that is why we are standing here tonight. And that is why about a year ago we decided to take the plunge, if you will, and get involved in this effort. And to show you how successful this has been, and to show you how much of a need that it was for WPC to get involved in the effort, in about a 10-month period, we were able to raise about $100,000 in seed money to open up the WPC Initiative on Agriculture. Now, that is just a small part of the effort. Now that we've raised that money, now that we've opened the WPC Initiative on Agriculture, we need to keep the success going. And that's what tonight's effort is all about, to not only celebrate the first year, but to keep the success going. So we're here tonight to say thank you, and here tonight to ask you to help us keep the effort going and to help us celebrate what Madi has done in this first year on the job at WPC. So we look forward to celebrating here tonight with Madi, with the Congressman, and with all of you. And we're here tonight to say thank you very much for your effort and for your successful work to make this policy center so much of a success here in Eastern Washington and all across the state. So thank you all very, very much.
All right. Thank you, Chris. This has been an amazing ride the last year. I want to share just a few stats that we've accumulated over the last 8 months. As we officially opened the doors on July 1st, we announced it in March. So in 8 months, we've had 35 agricultural speaking engagements around the state. We've attended 7 trade shows, met with 38, and that's probably closer to 40 by now, stakeholders, posted 18 blogs, published 6 studies, been featured in more than 40, and now I want to say specifically, I had 2 more tonight, media stories throughout the state, and had the opportunity to testify in front of the legislature 3 times so far this session. So we want to thank you for all of your support so that we were able to do that. But there's still so much left we have to do. As I met with all these groups, each time I meet with someone, it adds another issue to my list. And I realize these concerns are constantly changing and even growing. A legislative work session in the House, I believe it's the House Agriculture Committee, asked the Washington Farm Bureau, well, could you identify your top agricultural concerns? And I was watching on TVW and I kind of laughed of how much time do you really have to listen to our top concerns. But all joking aside, these concerns range from water, labor, transportation, the Growth Management Act, ag energy, our access to technology, our environmental impact, and the list goes on and on and on. And those are all general areas, and if you want to dive into each and every one, water has probably about 20 that I know of, and I'm trying to work on 10 specifically. So it's very busy, and there's a lot going on. But it is very important that WPC keep doing this work. Just take a look at your table and you can see how much your meal cost you for regulatory costs tonight. And it may be a little hard to swallow that the meat in front of you, just for food safety regulations, costs 1.7 cents a pound. That's kind of ridiculous, and that's just food safety. So my goal is to continue putting agriculturalists and putting farmers at the center of ag policy and focusing on local solutions and providing good incentives for change to our agriculture policy. So maybe next year and in the years to come, that price will get a little bit lower. But one of our most important issues right now is the Snake River dams. How many are heard of that or have heard of that or are affected by that, annoyed by that, all sorts of different things. So Todd Myers, our environmental director, is the expert on this, and he is going to give us some information and background, and I hope you will all give him your full attention and listen to what he has to say. So tonight, Todd, it's all you.
So I had the privilege of being part of the group that did the interviews for the agricultural position, and when we interviewed Madi, we were very impressed, and I could tell that she was really committed to the job. When we told her, I said, okay, we've hired you, we want you to, your job is to protect the future of agriculture in Washington State. And I think she really took that to heart because almost immediately she had a baby. So there we go. So I got a call on the way down when we were driving over through the snow, and I got a call from a reporter who said, I want to talk to you about the dam issue. And I said, that could be anything that I deal with. But this was the particular dam issue that they wanted to talk about, was the proposal to tear down the Snake River Dam. So as many of you know, there is a fight over the Snake River dams, the impact that they're having on salmon. And a federal judge ordered last year that the Army Corps of Engineers had to look at alternatives for the dams and how they dealt with salmon, and said you must consider tearing the dams down. And so I was actually invited to speak at the University of Idaho about these issues, and people were arguing about all of the various issues that were involved, and I was surprised to find out that they knew very little about the electricity value and what it would take to replace that. And so I decided to go ahead and point the clicker where it will turn. So I decided to go ahead and talk about electricity, and because I do a lot of work on energy and look at the impact. So the basic argument, as many of you know, that there are pluses and minuses, that they provide transportation for goods. I spoke with wheat growers at one point, and they said that wheat comes from as far away as Iowa, and they will take it by train, and they will take it to Lewiston, and they will unload it onto a barge in Lewiston. And think about what that takes, the transaction cost of unloading it, but the cost of transporting it by barge is so low that it makes sense if they're trying to take it to the mouth of the Columbia to do that. There is some irrigation. The Snake River dams are not big on irrigation. There is some incidental irrigation that goes on, flood control, and then electricity, which I will talk about, which is very important to the stability of the grid in Washington State. Not only is it low cost, not only is it flexible, but at a time when we're trying to find all sorts of ways to reduce carbon, and we have lots of regulations to do that, eliminating them would make it very difficult to meet those carbon regulations. But of course, the fight is about the impact on salmon. And when you're talking about the Snake River dams, you have to try to weigh all these things and to see which makes sense, what are the pluses and minuses in each area. So I'm going to focus just on the electricity cost. I will focus on one other thing, which is the recreation. To be honest, I don't know where to point this. There we go. Okay. So about 8% of Washington State's energy comes from the 4 lower Snake River dams. And it's very low cost. According to Bonneville Power, it's about 3 cents per kilowatt hour. If you don't get a sense of what that is nationwide, for industrial users, it's about 6.4. And that's one reason that we get manufacturing in Eastern Washington. Ironically, if you care about, green jobs, REC Solar, which is in Moses Lake, is in Moses Lake because we have low-cost electricity, because they're manufacturing. And so if you get rid of the low-cost electricity, you actually kill green jobs like REC Solar. average annual value of the electricity from those dams, if you take into that cost account, about 8.37 million megawatt hours, which is about almost $300 million a year in a typical year. That's a lot. And you would have to find a way to replace that, and you would ultimately end up having to replace it with higher cost. Just one more last thing about that. When we were debating at the University of Idaho, there was an opponent of the Snake River dams and said, oh, it's only about 2% of the region. But that's talking about the whole region. In Washington State, it's 8%, which is equivalent to all of the wind and solar energy in Washington State. Think about if somebody came forward to the legislature and said, you know what, I just want to get rid of all of the wind and solar power in Washington State. The environmental community would freak out. And yet that's essentially what you're talking about when you're talking about getting rid of those Snake River dams and the carbon-free energy. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper than wind and solar. In fact, hydro is critical to making sure that wind works in Washington State. Wind is very intermittent. We don't have batteries that can store the electricity in any sort of reasonable way for any sort of reasonable amount of time. And so what you have to do is you have to adjust the power that you put on the grid based on when the wind is blowing. And as much as we think that the wind blows during the day, actually most of it blows during the night. That's really when the power, when you see the power come on from wind. And in fact, this lower graph, let me go back. There we go. This lower graph down here shows the blue is hydro, and down at the bottom, if you can barely see it, is green. And if you'll notice that there was a big spike in green in the middle of the night, well, middle of the night is not the time we use electricity. Peak is in the middle of the day. And so when wind starts blowing in the middle of the night, something has to adjust. And the thing that adjusts is hydro. It is the thing that is most easily turned on and off. Natural gas, you can turn it on and off, but it still takes a little bit of time. Hydro works really well. You can turn it on and off almost instantaneously. And if you don't use it, all of that water is essentially stored electricity behind the dam. It's very flexible. The reason wind works in Washington State is because we have hydro. So not only are you losing carbon-free, cheap electricity, you're also losing the thing that makes wind work. So if you really want, as the environmentalists argue, more wind in Washington State, getting rid of hydro is a really dumb thing to do. So, given all of that, what does it cost to replace that electricity? Let's say we tore down the dams, and let's say we had to go and find a way to replace that electricity. There are two costs. There's a cost to replace the electricity and a cost to replace the carbon value. Now, even if you don't care about the carbon value, we have regulations that we're trying to meet that exist in Washington State, and in order to meet them, we make it harder if we don't have that carbon-free energy, okay? So here are the costs. It would cost, if you replaced the dams with natural gas, it would cost $153 million, almost $154 million more per year to ratepayers in Washington State. If you replaced it with wind, it would be $162 million more per year. These are not my numbers. These are the numbers for the Energy Information Administration. So this is the federal government saying that based on our projections in 2020 of what it would cost to replace this electricity, that's what it costs. What could you do with $153 million more a year? What would that do to manufacturing, to the taxpayers, to the ratepayers of Washington State? We're constantly hearing about the challenges of having money to fund projects at the state level, the taxes. We're talking about trying to make it a good place to do business in Washington State. And in this one single action, we would add $153 million in the best case every year. The second thing is that since we're trying to reduce carbon emissions, even if you're an environmental advocate who thinks that we ought to do that, tearing down the dams has a high cost. And you can estimate the cost of doing that based on what it costs in California and elsewhere. And if you replace that with natural gas, you would add about $55 million in carbon reduction costs, and with wind about $21 million. So either way, you're adding about $200 million of costs in electricity and lost environmental values. That's what you have to make up. And so I think people certainly can say, all right, we understand the impact on salmon. We understand the impact on the environment. But if we're not getting $200 million a year in value back in other amenities, then this is a bad trade-off. And what I'm focusing on is just electricity. I'm not focusing on the transportation value or the other values that are the other amenities that come along with having those 4 Snake River dams. I just had to add this one last thing because it just drives me insane. When I used to work at the Department of Natural Resources, one of the things that the environmental community would always say is, oh, well, we'll protect this forest, but that's okay. The community will see a huge increase in ecotourism, right? Rich people will come in their Subarus, and they'll spend lots of money, and everybody will be very happy, and it'll be way more than the value of harvesting those trees or anything else. And so I would go around to the communities that had been promised that these things would occur, and we would stay in the hotels, and I would say, so, who stays at your hotel? And they would say, mostly salesmen. I'd say, oh, do you get a lot of visitors? Do you get a lot of people who are tourists? No. Right? It just didn't happen. But that is one of the arguments that they make, and try to make up for that $200 million. One of the arguments that you'll hear is, oh my God, without those dams, people will absolutely flock to the Snake River. My wife grew up in Clarkston. I went to school in Walla Walla. I don't mean this the wrong way, but people from California are not going to come to the lower Snake River to go fishing. And I think the people who say that have never been there in the first place. Okay? This is not to say that some people might not. But it's not going to make up $200 million. And the best example I have is when they tore out the Elwha Dam over on the Olympic Peninsula, which is right on the edge of the Olympic National Park. And so they said, boy, by tearing down the Elwha Dam, it'll be free-flowing, it'll be wonderful, people want to come to see it, it'll be more natural. And so I went and looked at the data. One of the nice things about the National Park Service is that they do keep good data. So I looked at the number of visitors to the entrance where the Elwha Dam was. And sure enough, you can see a huge spike in the number of visitors right after the dam was torn down. And then you see a huge drop-off right after that 1 month. 1 month is what that lasted. And then you can see it goes back down basically to where it was before. It goes up a little bit in the summer, basically where it was in the previous summer. But there's no long-term impact. And the ultimate irony is there are 0 visitors right now because the dam is not there. The river washed out the road to get to where that was. So, when people tell you that, oh, don't worry, recreation will make up for it, I think you should probably be dubious of that. But that's the kind of research we do. We try to fill in the gaps of the things that people aren't telling you, both on the environment and agriculture. And this data is extremely useful to policymakers. And I can tell you that we make a difference, both in terms of the policies that ultimately come out of Olympia, but I can tell you personally that when I testify before a committee, I see skeptical faces on the part of legislators who disagree with us. And when we present information like that, I see the look on their face change from one of skepticism to concern. And that's when I know I've made a difference. And with your help, we can continue to provide the sort of data and information to legislators, to the media, to the public, that make sure that we make good decisions, not only for the economy and the future of agriculture, but for the environment. Thank you so much.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the meal or finishing enjoying the meal and the good company at your table. My name is Dan Meade Smith. I'm the president of the Washington Policy Center, and I want to welcome you back to the program, and you'll be hearing from our featured speaker in just a few minutes. When we first decided to hold our agricultural dinner, our inaugural one, we wanted to make sure we did it in the Tri-Cities. The Tri-Cities has embraced our organization. We have one of our 4 offices is here in the Tri-Cities, literally just up the road, where our Government Reform Center and our new Agricultural Policy Initiative are both housed. So we decided to hold this first event here in Pasco in the Tri-Cities. So thank you again for being with us tonight. We talked earlier about some of the key players that made this new research initiative possible. And really the one that stands out is the Washington State Farm Bureau. So I wanted to bring John Stuhmiller. John is the CEO of the Washington State Farm Bureau. A lot of folks in this room know John. And John just wanted to say a few words about our partnership with the Farm Bureau, which we're very, very pleased and honored to work with them, and appreciate John and his 2 tables of Farm Bureau leaders with us tonight. John?
So thank you, and good evening to each of you, and I'm delighted to see a room full of folks here. As a lifelong public policy advocate for agriculture, I got the bug early actually in the Nixon administration years, when then Secretary of Agriculture Earl Butz came to my family's wheat farm in Lincoln County, and I just have had a passion for agriculture and agricultural policy since then. So delighted that my organization, the Washington Farm Bureau, stepped up in a big way to help this Ag Center get its legs under it. And I'm a personal contributor as well, and I hope that you all will take time to make a generous contribution, because this work is incredibly important. We need every tool available to us, as agriculture truly is in some of its most perilous times, I believe, in our history, just the challenges. And thinking that my grandfather earned more from a bushel of wheat than my family's getting today. You know, those kinds of things that come to mind, just the challenges we face. We got to do it better, faster, cheaper, smarter. And part of that is one of those tools is in our public policy advocacy work is the Policy Center. And you know the work of the Policy Center from those other centers, tremendous work. And I was really excited when Dan and Chris approached me, and we started talking in that think tank realm, and knew that this could just be a great tool in our arsenal for helping to tell our story, but also to get those facts and figures out there to help just kind of push the work forward. So thank you all for coming tonight and for the opportunity to speak to you, and just encourage you to think about this, and let's make this a truly successful program. So have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you, John. And again, thank you for all you've done to partner with us tonight. As you're finishing your dinner, I hope you heard what Madi mentioned before you started eating. This is kind of a cool little table tent on your tables where it talks about what the regulatory cost of what we're eating tonight for dinner. So she took the actual menu we're having and broke out some of the key hidden costs, which is kind of a value added and in a different way to explain the impact of regulations to the ag industry, just to the average person having dinner. So you'll see it here tonight, but we're going to do this in other places as well, to folks that aren't involved in the ag industry, for them to see exactly, to kind of personalize the issues that we're working on to them as they're eating meals, around their family table. You met some of our key leaders earlier, especially Bob Tippett, who's on our board and who helped put this whole project together about 18 months ago. I also want to introduce a couple of our other board members that are here tonight, Mark Pinkowski and Roger Bolin, folks on the west side who came over tonight. So thank you for being with us. And I also wanted to introduce our board chairman, Craig Williamson. We're blessed to have a 30-member board of directors who are so much more than just names on letterhead. They are very active. We have active board committees, and they take an active role in the organization. And we're very blessed to have, at the top of that, Craig Williamson, a small business owner who has taken time out from his business and his family to devote significant time to the Washington Policy Center. So Craig's with us tonight and going to share a few words. Craig?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. As Dan said, my name is Craig Williamson, and he got the blessed part wrong because it's been my distinct honor to be associated with the Washington Policy Center, and to be chairman is just an incredible privilege, and I'm humbled by it. Dan mentioned I'm a business owner. Actually, he's a stickler on facts, but he got that one wrong. I don't want to correct you in public, Dan, but I actually sold my business recently, due in part to the burden and the threat and the weight of regulation. I owned a heating and air conditioning company west of the hill, had 100 and some people. And we had the Department of Labor and Industries, we had the Energy Code. It was never ending, and I got a little frustrated, and I sold my business. So I can certainly say that that experience gives me an ability to relate to the effect that policy has on real people and real businesses. There have been a fair amount of thank yous and congratulations tonight, but we passed over what might be the most important one. I remember my wife and I had a twinkle in our eye. We wanted to start a family, had a couple of kids, and then everything happened real fast. But it wasn't as fast as the twinkle converted to this evening, and the work that's been done by Madi Clark and the people in Washington Policy Center is just amazing what's been done and how fast it's been done. So if you are part of the WPC team, I want to embarrass you, ask you if you'd please stand up and let us congratulate you on a spectacular kickoff to the agricultural project for Washington Policy Center. And Maddie, you in particular, we're just delighted to be working with you. We drove over here, and it was a incredibly diverse experience. Dan and I and Todd drove together, and we had rain, and then snow, and then the mountains, and then sunshine, and then flat, and then hills. And it reminded me of how diverse Washington is. Certainly its geology and topography, but obviously also its politic. And I make an occasional visit to Seattle, and you want to talk about different. There's definitely some differences in the way that people in Washington State think about things. And it just stands out to me. But one thing that we're not different in, and that we all share, is we are all, every citizen of Washington State are stewards to extraordinary responsibilities and freedoms that are bestowed upon us. And we have this obligation to pass those forward. And if you think about that, how are those great American ideals propagated, right? How are they passed forward? There actually is a key fundamental element to how that's accomplished. Can you think of what that would be? Like, what is the prerequisite to the propagation of the American promise? Our founding fathers wrote about it, at great length. The key, the prerequisite is an informed citizenry, right? The informed public who votes their constituents, right? Who votes their representation in the government. That's the core mechanism of what allows us to enjoy the benefits of our freedoms and our opportunities. And that plays right into the mission of the Washington Policy Center. The mission of the Washington Policy Center is to improve lives of Washington State citizens, right, through free market solutions. We do that by providing a steady stream of unbiased, non-political, objective, factual information that people need to make decisions, to cast their votes, to propagate the American dream. I mean, it is a very fundamental thing that we do. And I couldn't be prouder of the work. We do have a strategic planning process. It's a fairly formal operation like any successful business might be. And our most current strategic planning process includes an explicit decision to embrace Eastern Washington, the agriculture community, the agriculture industry, and all that stands for. And I don't think we ever imagined, we knew there was a need, but I don't think we ever imagined that we would receive the kind of reception that we've received from you as quickly as we have, and we thank you for that. It's just tremendous. The work is never done. It's kind of like, I don't know, have a good diet or be in physical shape, or maybe your faith journey. I mean, you have to work on it a little bit every day. You never get to the end when you're done. And policy work is much like that. I'm going to cherry pick a couple of items for you before we continue the program and give you an update. One of the items would be charter schools. So the notion of choice, the parents allow their children to go to school in places that they choose, has been a horrific fight in Washington State. You may remember that there was an initiative that was passed by the voters, that was then struck down by the Supreme Court, and then was remedied by the state legislature. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and you should know that the Washington Policy Center is in the thick of it in those types of battles, and specifically in that battle. And Dan, I don't know, I thought we had it in the can the last 2 times, but I think we're actually to the point now where charter schools is the reality in Washington State, and it's got a future, and it's producing tremendous I don't have the data with me. I rattled it off at a previous dinner of ours, but the results have been overwhelming. The young children of the most severe need have eclipsed the public school performance in dramatic ways in only the first year. So charter schools represents the type of work that the Policy Center is doing and the type of benefit that flows to Washington State. But I got to tell you that there is a notion about there's no silver bullets, and I believe in that. But there is a singular issue in Washington State that perverts the entire policymaking process. And I think most of you are already dialed in, but just to be sure that we all understand what's happening in Washington State, I want to take a moment and bring to your attention right to work. So Washington State is not a right to work state. In Washington State, if you have a public sector job, it's mandatory that you are a member of a union. And we're talking about like 400,000 people. These are teachers, state patrol, sheriffs, firemen. These people are all required to be a member of a union. Furthermore, they are required to have automatic payroll deduction of their dues. A significant portion of those dues are used to elect governor and legislators that are beholden to the unions that got them elected. In this last election cycle, our governor received a $700,000 campaign contribution from public sector unions 2 weeks before entering into, by the way, private secret negotiations with public sector unions for their contracts. And then he received an additional $200,000 campaign contribution after the negotiations. It doesn't make any sense. The fact that public sector unions can essentially commandeer the policy-making process in the legislature is distorting the politic in Washington State, and it's not distorting it to your advantage. You may not be aware of this circumstance, but I want you to be, and even if it doesn't ring as a top priority for you, please take the time to understand it and to participate in the process of us moving towards a reality where it's not mandatory to be a member of a union to be a school teacher. It's happened in states you would never imagine. It happened in Michigan, it happened in Wisconsin, it's happening in Kentucky. We're talking about, I think it's happening in Missouri. So if this issue can get resolved, the entire policy landscape in Washington State changes to much more of a merit-based process. And so I wanted to have that be on your radar and ask you for your support. Now, what we care about and why we're all here is because of ag policy. And in some respects, it should have been the first thing that WPC did, given the importance of it. I believe like 14% of the entire state's economy is ag related, right? The problem is it's so difficult. Right? I mean, ag policy is the confluence of transportation policy, environmental policy, labor policy, regulatory behaviors. It's a very, very challenging area, and we don't have all the answers. The relationship with you is not a one-way street where we tell you what's going on and what we're doing. It's a two-way street where you tell WPC what you're experiencing, what your insights are, what your realities are, so we can work together to bring about policy trajectory in Washington State that makes sense, right? It's not easy. There's lots of trade-offs, and I'm just delighted that we've taken it on. You may be aware that we're picky about our wording, right? And so if you look carefully at our material, the ag thing, it's actually not a center, right? What does it say? It's an ag policy initiative. I don't know what they call in high tech. You do like alpha and beta releases or whatever. So we're doing a probe to see whether or not there's adequate support for ongoing investment in ag policy. And so I join the others in thanking you for helping it get this far, but I also implore you to continue to support it so we can go farther. We would love to make it into a full-blown center and make it be a headline area of policy research for us. So I give that challenge to you. I hope when we come back next year, the room's twice as big and it's an official center and we're making a big difference. Having said that, I noticed there was a bunch of people that did not raise their hand when Chris asked them. And by the way, Chris, you are such a rock star. Where's Chris Cargill? I can't see. Chris, you are just amazing, man. If you don't know Chris Cargill, you need to, because he's the guy that you want to know. So people didn't raise their hands when Chris asked me if you knew. So we've got a little video that's actually kind of a look back over our shoulder. We had our 20-year anniversary this past year, and we splurged on a video that we showed at our annual dinner in Spokane and then again in Bellevue. And so we're going to share that video with you to give you a little bit more of confidence about the history of WPC. When the video's over, Dan Mead-Smith will be back up to join you. And thank you so much. God bless you all.
In the face of freedom being eroded, in the face of a society that demands prosperity, we know only the free market provides equal opportunities for all. Some defend freedom on the battlefield. Some defend freedom at the Capitol. Some defend freedom on our streets. Washington Policy Center defends and advocates for freedom to the media, to lawmakers, and to the man on the street. Because success for all requires freedom for all. A better tomorrow starts with better policies today. Tonight we celebrate what our supporters have made possible over the last 20 years. Washington Policy Center.
A generation ago, it became apparent that the forces pushing higher taxation and ever-entangling regulation were carrying the day in Olympia. Well, a group of us who believe that progress came from freedom, not from more government, decided to push in the other direction by founding an organization based on limited government, freedom, innovation, and free markets. That organization was Washington Policy Center.
We opened our doors with 4 employees and a mandate to utilize high-quality research to develop and provide credible, independent policy analysis and solutions. In 2001, Dan Mead-Smith became the president of Washington Policy Center. He and a solidified new board of directors took it upon themselves to move the organization to the next level.
2003 brought us our first full-time research center, the Center for Small Business. With the success of that center, WPC embarked on a capital campaign in 2005 to open up 6 full-time research centers. The Center for Education, the Environment, Government Reform, Healthcare, Small Business and Labor Reform, and the Coles Center for Transportation. And in 2016, we launched the WPC Initiative on Agriculture.
In 2004, we published our first policy guide. This book put forth policy recommendations that were centered on the core principles of free market solutions. The goal of this popular publication is to present ideas to policymakers, allowing them to make decisions to improve the lives of Washingtonians, and have led to numerous bills and ballot measures that were passed into law.
In 2009, the growth of WPC took us across the state as the Eastern Washington office was opened. Since then, this office has been active in the unique policy dynamics of both the urban and rural farm communities. It's clear that in the past 6 years, WPC has become a force to be reckoned with east of the Cascades.
In 2010, an initiative was brought to the state of Washington to create a state income tax. A group of concerned citizens, including myself, worked together to help defeat the state income tax. It was a historic victory. Washington Policy Center's research was a large part of the conversation, and their analysis shed light to voters statewide.
In 2010, Washington Policy Center launched 2 important programs, the Young Professionals Group and the Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship. The WPC Young Professionals Group was started to educate, engage, and empower the next generation of free market leaders in our state. The Jennifer Dunn Thompson Scholarship was founded to empower female college students who exemplify the late Congresswoman's leadership.
In 2012, our state experienced a huge victory when Washington voters passed the Charter Schools Law, bringing education choice to families for the first time in our state. In 2015, just 3 weeks into our school year, the state Supreme Court struck down that charter school law. We fought tooth and nail, and the Washington Policy Center, along with the charter school community, were an integral piece in that fight. They helped us keep our school open by releasing TV ads, newspaper ads, numerous publications. All of the hard work paid off, and charter schools like Excel are knocking it out of the park for some of our state's neediest children.
Washington Policy Center operates on an annual budget of $2.7 million. Our work is funded primarily by individuals and small businesses throughout our state. We have thousands of supporters statewide who contribute to support our work and impact each year. Thanks to the generous support of these donors, we currently employ 20 people in 4 offices throughout the state. Our work is in the media an average of 7 times a day, featured in both local and national news outlets.
Looking towards the future of the Washington Policy Center, we have a lot of tailwind at our back. We've got a lot of momentum. What we need to do is we need to capitalize on that momentum and continue to bring forward our ideas that are the best ideas for every person in the state of Washington.
The burden of a representative democracy is that we live in a world of our own creation. The Washington Policy Center stands in the gap between the person on the street, the public official in Olympia, and the reporter on a deadline.
The people of Washington Policy Center go to work each day with 1 foot in the real world and 1 foot in a better world. Their ears are listening to the concerns of their neighbors, while their eyes are on practical solutions that make life better for everyone. And the reason they fight, and usually win, is because of support from people like you. Thank you for all you've given and all you continue to give.
All right, well, I hope that gives you a good, thank you. Hope that gives you a good flavor, if this is your first WPC event, of the breadth of issues we cover, and most importantly, the impact that we're having across our state. So at this time, I encourage all of you to take the card that's in front of you at your place, and I hope you'll consider joining. If this is your first event, you can join Washington Policy Center for as little as $50 a year. You'll receive our publications, you'll receive our quarterly magazine Viewpoint, you'll be invited to our events, and we regularly hold events in the Tri-Cities. This is our first Ag Dinner in the Tri-Cities, but we hold 5 or 6 events every single year here in the Tri-Cities area. I know there's folks that were with us from the very beginning when we started this Ag project. There's folks that were with us as we grew into a full initiative, and then there's folks that are sponsors tonight. But many of you I know are new to Washington Policy Center. So I hope you'll take this card. It says Support Washington Policy Center, and put it in the red envelope that's on your tables, and join with us tonight. Not only will you receive those benefits, but you'll know that our work, our ideas, the ideas that Madi's working on every day, the really powerful statistics that Todd shared about the Snake River dams, that work will get out to more and more people across Washington State. A lot of you know these issues. I guarantee you those statistics on the Snake River dams are brand new information to folks on the west side of the mountains. And that's one of the reasons why we started this ag initiative, is not only do we want to articulate the issues of the ag community, we want to make sure the people in Seattle and Olympia understand the importance of ag and what these different regulations and policy issues, what the impact is. So we're just going to take a couple minutes for you to take out the cards. I hope you'll fill them out, whether either you're renewing your support tonight at the organization or you're joining with us. Please take a few minutes to fill the card out. And again, you can put your filled out cards in this red envelope and our staff will come by and pick them up. One group that you'll see on this list is the Pillar Society. For those of you that are seeing folks with gold name badges, the Pillar Society is our major donor program that we started a few years ago. We now have 100 members of the Pillar Society. This is really the core group of the organization that gives us the seed money that we need to start new projects like this and to continue our support. And we have several Pillar Society members with us in the Tri-Cities, so I'd like them to stand and be recognized. Roger Bolin, Kevin and Renee Boucher, Bill and Meredith Ferris, Bob and Marilee Tippett, Chris Sensky, Rick and Mickey McKinnon, Mark Pinkowski, and Kende and Simplot. So if you could all stand, and we appreciate everything you do as part of our Pillar Society. As you saw in the video, one of the new components of the organization is our Young Professionals program. It's one of the most exciting things that we're doing at the Policy Center, engaging folks in their 20s and 30s in public policy. Not to necessarily run for office, but to understand the importance of public policy to their family, to their business, and to their community. So this dynamic group of folks in their 20s and 30s is growing. It's over 1,000 strong now across Washington State, folks that go to our Young Professional programs. And we now have 4 Washington Policy Center clubs on campuses across the state. University of Washington, Seattle U, Washington State University. We have a big event at Washington State later this month, and we just opened our latest club at Gonzaga. So we're engaging not only folks after college, but now in college on the importance of public policy. And one of the leaders of our Young Professionals board is right here in the Tri-Cities, Kate Lampson. A lot of you know Kate and Lampson International. Kate's, again, one of our Young Professional board members, and she has taken upon herself to start a new chapter of our Young Professionals group right here in the Tri-Cities. I've been to several events that they've held, and they have several events coming up here in the Tri-Cities area. So if you're in that age demographic, this is your first event, I encourage you to connect with Kate Lampson and get involved with our Young Professionals program right here in the Tri-Cities. So Kate is now going to introduce our speaker, Congressman Newhouse. Kate?
Well, thank you for that warm introduction, Dan. Well, good evening, and thank you all for joining us for the inaugural Washington Policy Center Agriculture Dinner. My name is Kate Lampson, and as Dan mentioned, I'm a member of the Washington Policy Center Young Professionals Board, as well as the Eastern Washington Advisory Board. And I'm here this evening to introduce a man whom you all know. He was born and raised in Sunnyside, Washington, and after graduating from Sunnyside High School, went on to earn his Bachelor of Science degree in Agriculture Economics from Washington State University. He was elected 4 times to the Washington State House of Representatives, where he served from 2003 to 2009. During his time in the legislature, he was known as a pro-jobs, conservative, problem solver, and in 2009 he was appointed as the Secretary of the Washington State Department of Agriculture by then Governor Christine Gregoire. He served in this capacity from 2009 to 2013, where he listened to the concerns of Washington State's farmers and promoted our agricultural resources. In November of 2014, he was elected as a Washington State 4th Congressional District representative and was reelected in 2016. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee and the House Rules Committee, and he is a graduate of the Washington Agriculture and Forestry Leadership Program. He is a member of the Columbia River Task Force and Daybreak Rotary. He is a past president of the Hop Growers of Washington and a past president of the Hop Growers of America. He was honored with the Washington State Potato Commission Legislature of the Year Award and is a recipient of the Association of Washington Business Cornerstone Award. When he is not hard at work in Washington, D.C., he enjoys being at home with his family, his wife Carol, his daughter Jensina, and his son Devin. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome to the stage Congressman Dan Newhouse.
Thank you very much, Kate. That's such a great introduction. I appreciate that. And you know, I appreciate the Policy Center deciding to have this meeting in Pasco. What's that old saying? Nobody thinks you are an expert in anything unless you're at least 50 miles from home. Or we're about 59 miles from my home, so maybe it works tonight. But, you know, I look around the room, and I was just telling folks at my table, I know it seems like about half the people in this room. I know you for a lot of reasons, partly in my work in the state legislature, partly maybe in the Department of Agriculture, maybe now in my new role as being your congressman, but a lot of you I know just because you're my neighbors or your fellow farmers, and so that's a good thing, I think. I believe that having the ability to say that I'm a fellow farmer gives me a lot more credibility in representing your interests in our nation's capital. Many of you know that I'm a 3rd generation farmer. I'm proud to say that our farm is now on its 4th generation. So we've been here a long time. We intend, and I know my banker's in the room, we intend to be here a lot longer too. I also am proud that my daughter Jensina is with me. She's here this evening. She's also involved in agriculture, been engaged with Washington State University doing research on wine grapes. So that's becoming an important part of our economy as well. So this understanding of our issues, like I said, it helps me be a better representative on agriculture's issues in Washington, D.C. Because many of the things that you know, agriculture is not simple. Don't get me wrong. It's very, very complicated. From bees on one hand to you name it on the other. I just happen to see Eric in the crowd. There are so many facets to the business of agriculture. The wonderful thing is the state of Washington is blessed with a wide variety of different crops that we raise in our state. This is one of the most, if you didn't know that already, you probably do. We are one of the most diverse agricultural states in the country. I think California probably is maybe a little bit more diverse just because they can raise certain citrus crops that we can't. But that's important because a fact that I like to share with people that I guess it was true in the State House as well. I always said that there was a handful of farmers and ranchers in the state legislature, and I could count them all on one hand and still have fingers left. Well, in the United States Congress, and I'm talking both Senate and House, 535 people, there are approximately 15 farmers and ranchers. I don't know what that percentage is. Some of you math whizzes figure that out for me, but it's not very great. It's not a very big number compared to what it used to be generations ago. So it's important that I think me or someone like me can bring to the table a lot of the experiences that speak directly to our issues. And even as a freshman congressman, I would have a lot of people come up to me and ask questions about particular things. Because everybody has to vote. Everybody has to make a decision on those issues that impact every one of you. So just think about that next time you are frustrated with something that you have to do because of your federal government. No less than, what is that, about 520 people who don't really have an experience in agriculture helped make that decision. So that puts on us, I think, all of us, a tremendous responsibility and a huge opportunity as well to make sure that people understand what it is that we need to be successful. So I'm particularly happy that the Washington Policy Center, the great organization that it is, and that was a great video that they just showed, it really was, has chosen Central Washington and has chosen to participate and be engaged in agricultural issues. We need that. We truly do. I didn't realize when I was first elected to the state legislature in 2002 that the Policy Center was only a year old. I thought you guys had been around for a long time. But I can't tell you how much help they were to me in my legislative career with issues. They were such a resource. Todd may not remember, but I certainly remember the great help he was to me when I was trying to accomplish things. And they didn't have an agricultural center at that time or an initiative, but they certainly covered a lot of other areas that were important to the policies that we were formulating for the state of Washington. So it's a great organization, and I'm glad that there is such great support in the room for the Policy Center and what they're doing here in Eastern Washington. So maybe many of you noticed that we've got a few things happening nationally in Washington, D.C. So there's been some changes over the last few months, wouldn't you say? I know my friends outside have noticed, and I'm assuming that you have too. There's a new administration that everybody's trying to get used to, bringing a lot of ideas to the table, bringing a lot of new people getting engaged in the federal government who haven't before. Fresh eyes, fresh perspectives. I think that's all a good, healthy thing. But there's some things that I just, to be frank with you, are causing people to pause and some concern. Certainly, since this is an agricultural evening, certainly in the agricultural world, there are some things, there are big question marks. Isn't that fair to say? Where is this administration going to take us? What's Congress going to do to us or for us? So I just wanted to talk about a couple of those things, and we're going to have an opportunity for you to ask some questions as well too. But I wanted to talk about just a couple things that I think stand out as important items or issues. One thing that comes to mind is that issue of trade. Mr. Trump has made some decisions and signaling that he's going to make more that do cause people in agriculture, certainly people in our state, to take notice. In a state that fully 40% of our economy relies on international trade. It's a big part of our agricultural economy. Just think of all of the things that we export. Apples, what is it, about John, is about 30% or more of our apples head out overseas. I know hops, I saw a hops table back there, that's pretty cool. Hops about 75% or so, Ann, isn't that about right? 80 are exported? Oh, it's gone down. Yeah, well, God love the craft brewers. But still, a large share of our hops are headed overseas. We also export, I shouldn't ask because I'll get corrected again, but I think between 50 to 60% of our potatoes end up in foreign markets. Hay has experienced a tremendous growth in exports, and we're hoping that that can rebound to what it once was. Just a lot of our crops end up overseas, so it's a big deal. And maintaining the access to those foreign markets certainly is a big deal as well. But like I said, there's a bit of trepidation about trade. You know, Mr. Trump has decided that the Trans-Pacific Partnership is not something that he can support. So we're not engaged in that anymore. We've backed away from that. We're more, I believe, the signals we're getting is that we're looking at bilateral trade agreements between our country and a single country, making agreements more on a personal level, so to speak, with individual countries. I think if that's the case, let's get started tomorrow. Let's get these trade agreements underway. Let's make sure that we keep the doors open for trade, make sure that we can export, that we have markets available to us around the world, because, like I said, it is so critical to our economy. And you know, there's more, I used to hear the expression, I don't hear it much anymore, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Bilateral trade agreements aren't all bad. Just look at the Korean free trade agreement. It's been a tremendous boost to our potato industry. In fact, I was very proud to be on the very first trade mission to go to Korea after that agreement was signed. You probably remember, and we're talking French fries here particularly that go to Korea, but the agreement that was signed in 2012 ended an 18% tariff. 18%. In the next year, the number of potatoes that went to Korea because of that reduction was something like 87,000 metric tons. A huge increase, and that's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of jobs here in Central Washington, and that's something that we can do with other countries as well. And like I said, we need to keep an open mind. We need to work to educate this administration on what we need, but we need to get started soon. We need to make sure that we get the kind of deals that keep us successful. Now, we're not in this alone. The state of Washington isn't, we're not the only ones that trade overseas. On the issue of trade, agriculture, and you can't say this about everything, but agriculture is pretty doggone united. There is an old saying about hop farmers, and I can tell a joke about hop farmers because I am one. But the only way that two hop farmers can agree is that one has to shoot the other one. But on the issue of trade, increasing our ability to market our goods, farmers, agriculturalists around the country are pretty doggone united on the importance of that, and we should take advantage of that. There's another issue that you heard a lot about in the last year and a half or so, and that's immigration and the need for immigration reform. And that's another topic that has caused a lot of concern for agriculture, particularly in the state of Washington and states like ours that have a very labor-intensive agricultural kind of industry, which we certainly do. And many of the people that we rely on fall into that category of immigrants. So it was plain that President Trump is eager to do something on immigration. He certainly wants to increase the security on our borders. I think it's fair to say that he wants to increase the security on the interior of our country. He's made a lot of changes so far, and I think he'll continue to make more. But I would tell you that I don't think the reforms and the changes he wants to make are all going to be under proclamation or executive order. He knows all probably better than most that any changes he makes just with a stroke of a pen can be undone by the next president. He's doing a lot of that himself, right? And so he's going to be able to advance his agenda. I think he's going to want to get a lot of things put into law, made into statute. So he's going to need Congress. He's going to need the House and the Senate to successfully pass his agenda so that he can sign it into law and be more likely to withstand the test of time. And I think we can make good progress there. I really do. I think did any of you listen to the president's speech a week ago? I think, yeah, it was a, you know, that just reminds me, prior to the speech, our offices were just getting flooded with phone calls. You've heard about what's going on in the country. The next morning, they didn't stop, but they dramatically dropped. And I think a lot of Americans listened, liked what they heard, and perhaps some of the anxiety that's present in the country maybe lessened a bit. And so people are feeling just a tad more comfortable with the president. But I think that was some signs in his speech, and there is also, I can tell you, interest on the part of many congressmen to work hard on immigration reform. And I'm telling you, I'm going to do whatever I can to bring positive solutions to our immigration issues that we have in this country. Not only, you know, not saying that selfishly as an agricultural employer, although certainly we need help there. We need a stronger H-2A program. We need a lot of things to have a legal workforce, which I think is what we all need. But for our communities in this country, right, we just have to fix our broken immigration program. And I think, as ironic as it may sound, I think President Trump is going to be the president that signs immigration reform. I really do. I think and I could be optimistic or overly so, but I really think he wants some changes, and in order to get the changes he wants, Congress is going to have to go along, and I think that we're going to have a balanced approach to solving immigration issues in our country. Yeah. Thank you. So there's no shortage of issues in Washington, D.C., in our country, and I don't have time to talk about all of them, but we can certainly get into some more when we sit here in just a second with your questions. But another area of, I think, of huge interest in the agricultural realm has to do with regulatory relief. And really here, in this realm, there actually is some room for celebration now. We've been moving quickly on this subject over the last month and a half or so. Already, some major rules that could harm producers have either been stopped in the courts or put on hold by this administration. A couple things come to mind. The Waters of the United States, or the WOTUS rule. Yes. I can judge from the reaction to that that's probably a good thing. And it is. It is. It will take away I think, the overreach of the Environmental Protection Agency on what farmers, not just farmers, but particularly farmers can do and what they cannot do on their land. So that's a good thing. The other rule that comes to mind is the overtime rule from the Department of Labor, a whole new perspective there, which is, I think, way overdue. There's also, I know many in the agricultural industry have had a hard time absorbing or swallowing the big pill as it relates to food safety and the Food Safety Modernization Act. Well, I can tell you that there is renewed interest from this new administration in making that much more workable for growers and for processors. So I don't have anything that I can announce to you tonight, but just know that we're working very, very hard on that. I also look forward to working with all my friends in Congress on issues that revise the rules governing forest lands. You know, it's very difficult because of the regulations that don't allow the management of our forest lands, not just by the agencies that have that responsibility, but also by the communities and the localities in which they live. And we see the result of poorly managed forests. You know, sometimes it's hard to see a tree around the Tri-Cities, right? But the north part of the district is covered in forest. In the last couple of years, unfortunately, a lot of that forest is blackened. It's been burned, and we've lost a tremendous amount of timber, a tremendous amount of grazing opportunities. We've lost property, homes, businesses, and unfortunately, we have lost lives in the process. And so this is something that we worked very, very hard on my first term in Congress. We didn't quite get it over the finish line because of some, I shouldn't say politics, but unfortunately we just couldn't come to agreement. So I'm hopeful that we can get that job finished this next year so that we can finally get our forest managed in a responsible way to minimize. You're never going to prevent all forest fires, right? But you can minimize the damage and you can lessen the negative impact. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also, you know, I would say particularly around this area, a source of particular distress has been the Endangered Species Act. It's something that on many levels has impacted farmers around the country, whether it's a particular species of plant or animal or fish, certainly is something that impacts us on our daily lives and the things that, you know, there was a lot of talk about the dams, all about the fish, right? And then the Endangered Species Act. I'm hopeful that those numbers that you came up with, Todd, will be helpful, not only to the folks in Olympia, but for us in Washington, D.C. as well. We need to make sure that the ESA returns to its original purpose of rehabilitating threatened species and not being used as a tool to be an impediment to business and to deindustrialize our country. That we need to help economic growth, not impede it, and that's unfortunately what it's been used for such a long time. I've been engaged in this. Have just last week, in fact, introduced a couple of bills to help on transparency and the ability for local governments and tribes and localities to be involved in whenever there's an ESA listing process, and get this, to make sure that federal agencies use sound science when they make these decisions and to be transparent about the process that they put us through in order to list a species. So I'll continue in my role in Congress to be an advocate for smart rules, whether it's with the EPA, whether it's USDA, FDA, all of the agencies that impact our ability to make a living, our ability to be successful, and our ability to feed not only the country but the world. You know, there's lots of things that we could talk about. Another one, and I know it's difficult to listen to a speech where there's just a grocery list of things that we can be considering, but there's just a ton of things that are on our plates right now. I want to make sure that you understand that we actually are working in Washington, D.C., unlike what some of the news reports would have you believe, but there are a lot of things that are going on. Another thing that is so important to our area is water. Whether you live in the Columbia Basin, whether you live in the Yakima Basin, whether you live up north, you know, agriculture in our part of the world wouldn't be very much if we didn't have the ingredient that's so necessary, and that's water. I always joke to people that I couldn't even grow weeds on my farm without irrigating, and that's almost true, right? Although they take off in the spring sometimes, but it's such an important aspect of what we do. So the question came up earlier about the infrastructure priorities of the new administration. And let me tell you, there's a lot of things, a lot of questions about that, how that might work, who's going to pay for it. certainly with the backdrop of a $20 trillion debt, that's something that we have to think about very carefully. But certainly we have needs in Central Washington. And if we can figure our way through how to be able to afford investments in infrastructure in this country, you can rest assured that water projects such as the Yakima Basin, the Columbia Basin, the Odessa Aquifer, those are the kinds of things that will be included on our priority list if we can figure out a way to make them part of that program. So there's other things, the Columbia River treating's coming up that is so critical to our area as well. The good thing is that the negotiator for the Columbia River Treaty is a holdover from the previous administration. I haven't heard that they're going to replace him, so we may not lose any time there getting someone new up and running. So that would be a good thing. Actually, I've met with the individual a couple times, and he's doing a good job, and I have high hopes for having a successful treaty negotiated, but we need to get that process started as soon as, or continued as soon as possible. Canada, as you know, just had a national election prior to ours. And that was always the holdup, that they were still getting their people into place in order to get the treaty negotiated. Well, they have now, and so I'm hopeful that our team will stay in place as well. And then maybe the last thing I'll talk about just a little bit is the Farm Bill. One of the biggest things that we do for the agricultural industry every 4 or 5 years, or it can be longer depending on how long it takes, is passing the Farm Bill. The bill that touches almost every aspect of agriculture, whether it's conservation, whether it's research, whether it's promotion of our products, all kinds of things. All of the food programs go through the Farm Bill. If you were paying attention to Kate, she said she didn't mention the Agriculture Committee. I'm no longer sitting on the Ag Committee, which was a hard thing to give up, but I'm now on the Appropriations Committee. So I think having that position as well as the Rules Committee will give me an even better position to have influence on things like the Farm Bill. It's not a very well kept secret, but almost everything needs some kind of appropriation. So the Farm Bill will go through appropriations, the Farm Bill will go through rules. I'm going to work very hard with my colleagues that are on the committee to make sure that the priorities that we have are included. Working right now with several of them on a couple of different ideas. And as that process moves forward, you can rest assured that agriculture for Central Washington will have a seat at the table when it comes to the all-important Farm Bill. So I think with that, I'll probably just stop and make sure that you make sure that any issues that I didn't cover, and like I said, there's a ton of them that you ask about, or if you're curious about, we're gonna have a short time here to be able to have a conversation. But just let me say that I think that these truly are exciting times. We have an opportunity right now in Washington, D.C. to really make some positive changes. And it's going to be my priority to make sure we take advantage as much as we possibly can of what we have been given by the American people. You know, we now have a majority of Republicans in the House, a majority of Republicans in the Senate, and a Republican in the White House. We have a lot of things that we should be able to get done. A lot of opportunities and a lot of responsibility as well. And I'm looking forward to moving forward in a very positive direction. But I always tell people that, you know, don't, and my constituents are great about this, don't just send me to Washington, D.C. and forget about me. Make sure that I know the things that you think are important. Let's make sure that the conversation between us continues so that I stand for the right things and make sure that agriculture in Central Washington can continue to be as successful in the future as it has been in the past. together we can make that happen. And I'm very excited about the opportunities that we have together. So thank you very much for having me. Again, I salute the Policy Center and the efforts that you're making on behalf of agriculture. If you didn't notice, Madi has just a tremendous amount of energy, and I think that that's going to bode well for their efforts here. And she's going to make keep you guys on your toes. You know that, Dan. So thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to a great conversation with you. Thank you. Oh. I'll just leave that.
All right, well, we'll get started. Thank you so much, Congressman Newhouse. It was a pleasure to listen to you. And in fact, you kept hitting a lot of my questions, and I kept going down my list going, oh no. So because I have to sit up here, I'm going to put him in the hot seat first. You mentioned a lot of federal issues. What would you say are our top three for Washington State?
The top 4 issues for Washington State from the federal level?
Yes.
Well, not to sound like a broken record, but I would think that in no particular order, some of the things that I covered, is, a top issue has got to be trade. You know, I can only eat so many apples, right? And you can only drink so many beers, right? We've got to be able to export our crops. Some of you are trying, though, aren't you? So I think trade's got to be right up there. Let's see. Like I mentioned, immigration particularly is a huge issue for our entire country, but also for our area as well, for a lot of reasons. Gosh, Craig said it. He was in business until regulation drove him out. How many of farmers do you guys all know that don't farm anymore? It's tougher and tougher to be in business in agriculture. So regulatory reform has got to be near the top of the list. It's tough to, a lot of small farmers sell out to bigger ones. They get, it just can't take all the responsibilities, all the different hats they have to wear. There's only so many hours in the day. And so I think regulatory reform has to be a part of that. You want 4?
Three is great.
Okay.
All right.
Well, easy. Water's got to be one too.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's an excellent point, and I thought you covered it really well. But the regulatory part, that leads me to a recent issue that came up that we saw in the Wall Street Journal, where they talked about the farm bust a couple of weeks ago. And my husband and I are recovering farmers at the moment. We tried while we were in college, and we were the victims of the highest wheat prices on record, which sounds really good until you try and buy land. So we've been there. We've been the ones that fell by the wayside. But someone brought up an excellent point to me of you have the farmers that are really, really large that are going to be just fine, and the farmers that are really, really small that are probably doing it as a hobby. But then you have these farmers in the middle that are trying to support a family, that they're the farm families that we care about, of trying to preserve that sustainability. So what are their concerns, and how do we address them?
Oh my gosh. See, I find myself in that category probably. We're not, we're incorporated just because of tax purposes, but we're a relatively small farm. And so we find the pressures of, well, gosh, there's so many of them. Look at, one of them is succession, right? Did you know that the average age of a farmer today is about almost 60 years old? Not everybody has a son or a daughter that can inherit the farm or they can pass it down to. So that's a real problem. Getting the next generation actually interested in agriculture is a real problem that goes along, but that's kind of another story. Like I said, I can, being a small farmer myself, I can remember so many times. In fact, this just came to mind. One of the reasons that I decided to run for political office to begin with, because I got sick and tired of waking up every day with some other reason to feel like a criminal, that I was doing something that was against the law or against some regulation somewhere. And so that was a big motivating factor to me. And it's just, for small farms to try to keep up with all of the government red tape is darn near impossible. And you know what they say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so you find yourself in hot water, unbeknownst to yourself. Most people are trying to do a good job with the environment. They're trying to do a good job with their employees and every other aspect, but it's just darn tough when you're that size of if you're a large farm, you can hire people to help you do that, but it doesn't always work for a smaller farmer.
All right, thank you. And I think we're going to move to questions. So are you ready? All right. So Chris Cargill, our Eastern Washington director, is in the back with a mic. So if you would like to ask Congressman Newhouse a question, just raise your hand and Chris will come and hand you the mic. So remember, questions.
All right. Just say who you are and who you're with, and I'll keep the mic in my hands so we can keep the conversations going.
So he's got us on a time limit here, Dan. That's code for... So Greg Vasquez Wafla, and we really appreciate all you're doing, Congressman. And I had the privilege of walking some precincts with you prior to the election, and I was really honored to do that, and it energized me. You mentioned the day after Trump's last speech that a lot of people called in, and that kind of energized me. Besides the status quo, what can we do? I mean, I can get my buddy here, Ben Cox, and we can strap our 6 guns and walk down the street, and when we feel cocky and want to support, what's going on, this whole revolution. But what can we do just down at the grassroots level when we want to really, you talked about us supporting you. When you're sitting there at your desk and you're saying, man, I need more energy. I need something from my constituents. Do we need to load up a bunch of semis and drive to Washington and display apples, or do a tractor, cavalcade, or what do you want us to do on the street here for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. There, on a couple different levels. That reminds me when I was back in the 1970s. Remember when all the farmers brought their tractors to Washington? I was there that day. That was kind of cool to watch. I think I would have wanted to be the tire dealer in their hometowns because tractor tires don't do well on pavement. But in this day and age, when we, I guess, finally have, in many ways, what many people have been hoping for a long time, and that's engagement by our citizenry, right? By the public being engaged in our government. At least I hope that's. I'm an optimistic person, so I hope a lot of that is what we are seeing. I know it's not all, but so recently we've been hearing a lot of things probably that have the origins in frustration or anxiety over what they see in a new president. And so you can imagine, out of the hundreds and hundreds, thousands of calls that we've been getting over the last month, most of them have been negative. Either issues with something I've done, which is fine, I'm totally fine with that, or what they think might be happening. And I guess what would be helpful to me personally, I'm not saying about the rest of Congress and all of Washington, D.C., but I certainly would like to hear a balance. If hear what the other side has to say more often. And I know that's we're all the same. If things are going okay, you're really not going to you're not going to call me. You're not going to send an email. Likely, you're not going to go out of your way to say good things. If you have a problem, though, you will do that. And so maybe it's a tough thing to do, but I think all of our elected officials need to know that there are people on both sides of this, and they need to hear a balanced message today. I have not got to this point, but I heard one of my colleagues tell me just a week or so ago. He said, I'm not hearing from anybody else. I guess the people that elected me, I'm going to have to go with what I'm hearing. And I think it's always difficult to do the right thing. It really is. Change is difficult for people, but it sure make it a lot easier if we heard from the people that want that change, more than just at the ballot box, but continually. So I guess that would be helpful. I wouldn't tell you to bring your semis yet, or the tractors to DC, but if we could light up the phone lines almost as much as the other side does, that would be helpful.
Okay, we have 3 more questions lined up back here.
Yeah, Congressman Newhouse, Chris Sensky from Sensky Lawn Tree Care here in Kennewick. And you've touched on immigration a little bit, and I just wondered, the H-2A thing is complicated and expensive. H-2B met its caps within the first few weeks of the year. And what is your vision for resolving the immigration situation?
Well, thank you, Mr. Sensky. There's a lot of things I think that can be done to help with the immigration problems that we have. Number one is to have a Department of Labor that actually wants to help the H-2A and H-2B programs work. And that's something we haven't had, in my humble opinion. We've actually had people in the Department of Labor that are doing the opposite, that don't want to see those programs work. And so, we just see all kinds of unnecessary red tape. We see printer malfunctions that happen in inopportune times that hold up critical paperwork as people are waiting for folks to come in to help with their cherry crop or their apple crop. Time-sensitive things that, oops, all of a sudden we have an equipment malfunction. So I think that there's some, what we are getting, we don't have yet, but is new leadership at the top of an agency that is integral in making sure our labor programs can work better. I supported a bill, continue to support a bill that would actually move these labor programs from the Department of Labor over to the Department of Agriculture, an agency that, in my estimation, has a better understanding of agricultural needs. So we'll see if we can get any traction on that. There are a lot of improvements that could be made to H-2A, a lot of things that would make it less onerous, faster, more responsive to actual needs out there. Did you know that it doesn't work for some segments of our agricultural industry because they focus on seasonal labor? Well, if you're a dairyman, cows need to be milked 12 months out of the year. You need something that works for you. So there's different things that we can adjust in the H-2A program and the H-2B program. I've often said this shouldn't be rocket science to fix our immigration issues. We have people willing to do agricultural work that happen not to be citizens of our country. And I know for a fact that even though we have an unemployment rate in this country, it is darn hard to get people to come to work on farms. So what do you do about that? One thing you could do is not make it so attractive to get government services if you don't work. I guess that would be one thing. But another thing would be also to provide a way for people to come across a border, work legally, come across legally, work legally, and then when the work is done, go home legally. It doesn't seem that difficult, but unfortunately, you've touched on one of the most hot button issues in all of Washington, D.C., and probably in the state of Washington, too. It's a very difficult issue. There's a lot of aspects to it, but if you really boil it down, that's what I would foresee as a solution, at least for some aspects of it. And I know there's a lot of others.
Congressman Kurt Beckley from Banner Bank.
You promised you wouldn't ask a question.
I know, I'm sorry. Thanks for being a good customer. Hey, with the highlight of President Trump's speech the other night, other than recognizing our veterans' sacrifice and efforts, he promised some form of deregulation for taking 2 regulations out of the books for every one that's created new. Do you think that's a realistic approach? And you know, in particular with the dairy industry, as heavily regulated as they are, do you think that there's 2 that can be taken away for every new one, or can it, you know, can there be a compromise made to where regulations are just taken away without creating new ones?
That might be a better compromise, wouldn't it? So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about that well enough to really give you a great answer, Kurt. If we need to take 2 away for every one, if that really works or not, because you know, I used to run a regulatory agency, the Department of Agriculture, and there are certain regulations that are necessary and certain regulations that actually the industry wants in order to be able to make their food safety programs or their marketing programs, a lot of different things, whatever it may be, to make them work. So, you know, I haven't done the math. I guess that, you know, the president thinks that there's twice as many bad regulations as we need out there if you're instituting a new one, and that may be. I do know that the federal government has grown. It's grown out of hand. No one individual, president or anyone else, I think anymore can truly get their arms around the federal government. So I guess in answer to your question, we've taken a couple of shots at this. We've passed one particular bill that it's called the REINS Act, that any major rule, anything that an agency puts into place that is major, and that is a $100 million definition of impact, would have to come to the Congress, the voice of the people, for its approval. And I think that's one way that we can begin to get a handle on it. I wish I could, I didn't anticipate this question. There's some numbers out there that are pretty doggone surprising. You know, we'll pass like 300 bills a year, something like that. The number of regulations, new ones that are put in place, are in the thousands. So there is, you know, Mr. Trump may have an idea there, but I don't know if that's the only thing. But so we've taken a couple shots at maybe reining in some of these things. You know, another good idea that I think, you guys tell me if you like this. I think every single federal agency should have an expiration date. There should be, at some point in time, an ability for Congress to ask the question, do we still need X agency? And if we do, let's make sure it's funded and doing all the things we want it to do. If we don't, you know, nothing says that agencies should live forever, right? Let's review this. Let's take a look at these things. So I think the president's on the right track, but I can't tell you one way or the other if that's exactly the right answer.
Maddie, do we have time for a couple more here?
Yeah, we do.
All right.
Good. I'm Jim Pittman from Spokane, Washington, and I'd like to read you something here, and I don't know whether this is going to be anything or not, but parity is not a subsidy. It's a price mandated by law in the Agriculture Adjustment Act, Title III, Substitution, Section 301, and is amended in the 1948, 49, 56. Under the AAA, the parity price is commuted monthly on a farm commodities, and it has never been repealed even to this day. So I was wondering, is there any possibility for a parity price for us again?
Jim, was that your name?
Yes.
I bet you there's maybe 1 or 2 people in all of Congress that even know what parity is.
Well, I'd also like to say I've called my congressman, Kathy McMorris Rogers, a whole bunch of times, and I never got a damn answer.
Well, I remember learning about parity in ag economics at WSU, but I don't know that. I'll just tell you, there is no effort right now to go that direction. But let's have that conversation. I'm always open to ideas that how we can improve the situation for farmers. We need to be able to keep a strong agricultural industry. If that would help in that, I didn't hear your last name, Jim. I'm sorry. Is it?
I think he said Pittman.
Pittman. Okay. Okay. I'll pass that message on to Congresswoman McMorris Rogers as well. There's probably other people that would agree with you, and so let's have that conversation and see if that's something that we can bring forward.
Okay, we got one more right here as well.
Hi, I'm Roddy Bays. I'm with Washington Trust Bank. And you talked about the aging farmers, or the average age is over 60. So far, President Trump hasn't provided much insight about how he's going to do the estate tax. Has there been any discussion on that so far?
You know, we're going to be looking at a large overhaul of our tax system. I would suspect by end of summer or into the fall that there'll be something that you'll be able to see as far as it relates to tax reform. Certainly the inheritance tax is something that, the death tax, is that what you're referring to, sir? I don't know, you know, honestly, I don't know if President Trump, has he mentioned that at all? I don't recall. Okay. Well, I can tell you there's a lot of people that want to see the death of the death tax for once and for all, make it a permanent thing. And part of our tax reform, I think, I hope I'm not speaking out of school, but I think is included in that. We really haven't focused that much on the tax reform part yet, but with your input, I'll make sure that that message gets through.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
One more back here, Maddie.
All right, thanks. And I'm looking over at Jason Mercier for those tax questions. So he's at this table if you have any further follow-up. All right.
Excuse me, Congressman Newhouse. Hey, first of all, my name is Sean Small, and I'd just like to go ahead and you wanted to hear a kudo. You heard that earlier as far as being as far as an elected official, you know, instead of getting all the blame, you like to probably get a little bit of credit. So a question for you, the people who are here, who's actually dealt with the land police as far as DNR or maybe the Corps of Engineers? Or I assure you there's a lot of them actually aren't raising their hand, I promise you that. So with that being said, I just want to let you know that actually Sunhaven Farms, which is actually over there in the corner, reached out to me, and I, of course, went up contacting you in regards of some water issues. What the deal was is those guys planned in advance for nearly 18 months to turn around and actually get some piping brought in to actually be able to provide water for their land. Corps of Engineers said, yeah, not a problem. You guys can go and do that. We're good. No big deal. 6 months later, Corps of Engineers the farmers contacted the Corps of Engineers and said, hey, where are we at right now? You owe us $50,000 for the application. Then we can actually start proceeding to be able to work on this. So they actually kicked out $50,000. Through the course of the next year, getting close to a year and a half, the farmers actually received a letter going, hey, we're not going to be able to get this. You know, we'll probably have to get it for 2016. Well, during that time, they actually purchased nearly $1 million worth of pipe. They had us hold a barge at a tune of $250,000 non-refundable to be able to assist in the construction of the water to go out to their land. I then reached out to Congressman Newhouse, and I'm happy to say that within 3 months, the tides were turned. All of a sudden, DNR dramatically changed their tune, and that the farmers were actually able to have a very successful year for 2016. I just want to reach out to you in front of everybody and tell you without your help, that would not have been able to be done. And thank you so much, sir, for all the help you worked on that thing.
Well, thank you, Sean. I appreciate that, and I'm glad it worked out for them. Although I didn't ask for kudos. I hope you didn't catch that. I just wanted to hear a balance of what people's opinions are. But that's good. That's good. I appreciate it. And, you know, I think sometimes I can't tell you how frustrating it is to work with some of these agencies. It really is. If I had any dark hair left, it would be gray already. But you see, it already is. It is so frustrating. There's an agenda in some of these agencies. There truly is. I'm very hopeful that with new secretaries across the board, a new philosophy, a new perspective. You can't. They're not all political appointments, so there's still going to be a lot of the same people, but they'll have new direction from the top. That I hope that we can hear more stories like that into the future. I can't tell you. I've never been able to say that I personally know 3 federal secretaries of different departments. I can say that now. We should all be proud that one of our own, James Mattis, is Secretary of Defense. Yeah, that's really cool. So I think all of us should feel a little bit more connection to our government. And like I said, and I hope I said in my remarks, that I'm very hopeful for the future and optimistic that we can get a lot of good accomplished over the next few years. So I think together we can do that, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman Newhouse. And I want everyone to give him one big round of applause, some more kudos for everything he's done for us tonight.